A few decades ago, Gary Larson released a Far Side cartoon of a beaming mother and father watching their boy play video games as they dreamed of a newspaper page full of help-wanted listings begging for professional Super Mario players. The cartoon, titled Hopeful Parents, was an obvious joke because who would ever be dumb enough to pay someone to play video games? This historical artifact nicely encapsulates the sea change that we've experienced in public attitudes towards video games. Because, of course, today, people are paid to play games. Now, historically speaking, games, and video games included, have been equated with toys. And toys have been equated with child's play. And child's play, of course, is a trivial thing. But today, whether people are gamers or not, they're realizing that video games are not trivial. Video games increasingly captivate our culture, and they captivate our news, and they captivate our money. But why? Why are they such a big deal? Well, that's what I want to talk about for the next few minutes. My name is Kevin Scott. I'm a professor of media and communication here at Trinity Western University. I also founded the game development program at Trinity Western University, and that's why I'm talking to you today. We believe very much that video games matter. But why? Why are they, as I'm going to argue, the laboratory for the language of the future? Well, let's start with the most obvious reason that video games matter, and that is their economic impact. The amount of money spent on video games is massive. Of course, it all depends on how exactly you count things, but the video game industry certainly rivals the box office take of global Hollywood and other film industries around the world. It probably exceeds it. It's definitely hundreds of billions of dollars that are being spent every year on video games, software, and hardware, and video game paraphernalia, and conferences, and things like that. So there is a ton of money involved here. And of course, that means that there's hundreds of thousands of jobs around the world that are either directly working on video games or in industries that support the video game industry. So even if you're the kind of person that doesn't really enjoy playing video games, even if you're the kind of person that doesn't know how to use a controller properly, you still realize that video games matter simply because of the amount of money involved. But of course, I would argue that there's more value to video games than just monetary value. I personally love them, so I'm a little bit biased in this case. But I think that there's a number of ways that we can point to video games and point out how they are in fact really important to our culture. One of these is the new kinds of communities formed around video games. Obviously, people play many, many hours of video games, and I think a lot of us have a stereotype in the back of our mind that means that they are being antisocial, that they're sort of stuck by themselves, their eyes glued to a screen, and they're not interacting with anyone. Well, certainly that does happen. I'm a single-player video game, and I like doing that. But even the single players are not truly antisocial. I'm constantly interacting with other people about the games that I play. I write about them. I read about them. I will go to help forums to get help and things like that. That's a different form of socialization. And the fact is that a large number of gamers, possibly a majority, are actively socializing while they're playing games. We kind of forget this about games, but originally games were almost entirely social, except for maybe solitaire with cards. Video games are highly social. People play Fortnite together. They play World of Warcraft together. They invest in each other's lives. These new forms of interaction, like esports, which includes games like Fortnite and League of Legends and many other games, are in fact providing a new way for people to interact with each other and invest in each other's lives. Video games are a kind of social glue, a kind of social lubricant, to use a sort of opposite metaphor. They are something that bring people together, that give them an excuse to talk with each other, to have fun together. And yes, sometimes argue with each other as well, but in the process, they build relationships. They bond with each other, and that's a really important and very powerful thing. I would also argue that video games provide us new forms of media that spur on new forms of art. Think about the kind of older media that are available to us. We have all kinds of visual older media. We have textual older media, things like books. We have television and film. We have radio, and I would even argue that podcasts are a kind of old media form of expression in a new technological format. There's a huge range of recorded audio, recorded words, recorded visuals available to us. And video games can do all of those things. Video games, because they're computerized, are what we could call an everything medium. They can emulate any earlier form of communication. So they can provide still images, they can provide moving images, they can provide text, they can provide recorded audio. All of those things are possible with a video game. But on top of that emulation, they add the feature of interactivity. This is a really, really important thing. Interactivity, of course, is a fairly complicated concept because it can come in many different forms. Video games don't provide the same kind of interactivity that we would get in a face-to-face conversation with someone. Instead, the video game interactivity that's provided is like a recorded text that allows us to mess around with it. It's almost like a symbol machine, right? As opposed to a television show or a film or something like that, where everything is pre-recorded and every time we come back to it, it's exactly the same. Any video game, even the most highly scripted video game out there where it has a very, very predetermined storyline, allows for some form of input that gives us a feeling of participation, that gives us a feeling of investment in a different sort of level than even our favorite movies or our favorite books. That's not to say that those old media aren't important or aren't still compelling. It's that video games approach things like storytelling in a very, very different way, and they involve us in a very, very different way. And because of that, they actually point the way to a different form of art, a different kind of expression. I would also argue that video games are what I would describe as a laboratory for the future. There's a lot of different ways that we can see this. One of those is the way that game mechanics, that is, rules and systems from games and structures from games, have infiltrated all parts of our lives. In some cases, this is a sort of naked form of social engineering, where a company might gamify their workplace. If your workplace is a warehouse, for example, they may give people points for achieving their jobs in a certain time frame. There may be a kind of competition going on between the workers. And this is sometimes a bit of a dicey area, but it is something that is being incorporated into many aspects of our lives. Anytime you see some kind of running score, think our social media platforms, for example, there is a kind of game mechanic element coming in. And we're going to see more and more of that as things go forward. So as we experiment with games, we actually experiment with things that are happening outside of games as well. This is also true of the kinds of virtual environments that video games are experimenting with, namely VR and AR, or virtual reality and augmented reality. Virtual reality being, of course, a system that you put over top of your face and your ears, and you are immersed, fully immersed in a computerized environment that you can move around in and manipulate and interact with. Augmented reality is where you have a computer overlay on the existing world. A game like Pokemon Go, where you can hold your smartphone up, and as your camera takes a picture of the outside world, graphics of Pokemon are put over top of that outside world. Or a game like Mario Kart Live, where you have your Nintendo Switch in your hand and you're piloting an actual remote car around your kitchen, and it's showing up as a video game on your system. That's augmented reality. You can do this in non-game format. You don't have to use video games to do virtual reality or augmented reality, but video games seem to be the place where we're playing around with these technologies the most. And so it becomes a kind of laboratory to shape the kinds of discourse and the way that we communicate in the future. This is also directly related to the buzzword of the day, which is the Metaverse. It's actually kind of funny that Mark Zuckerberg has made a big deal about the shift of Facebook to Meta, acting like this is sort of a brand new concept or something that's really exciting and something that is very forward-looking. And I guess it is in some ways. But in the video gaming world, we've been doing this for almost 2 decades already. It's called a massively multiplayer online game. And it's a world where you have a persistent imaginary world. You have a character, an avatar that you pilot through that world that has a consistent identity. And you can sort of change it around and play around in ways that you couldn't in the physical environment. That persistent online presence, that persistent online imaginary environment that Zuckerberg and other people in the tech industry are so excited about is things that we've been working on in video games for a very long time already. Games are shaping this very, very important shift in communication and culture in our world. So we can argue fairly easily that video games matter. But what should we be doing with them? How should we be making them? This is why I'm so excited about the new program that we started here at Trinity Western University in game development. I think it's an opportunity for us to address a potential problem in this incredibly important field in our culture and society. Technical skill with limited moral depth is a recipe for destruction. We've seen that many times in our culture, in our history. Various groups and people who learn a new technology and then apply it in ways that damage the world around them. I believe that if video games are going to make a positive impact in this world, we need people working on them who have a big picture worldview. And I really strongly believe that those attitudes, that worldview should be grounded in a strong and clearly acknowledged faith. Now, Trinity Western University is a Christian university, and so all of our programs are based on a belief in the Bible, on a faith in Jesus, and we try very hard to make our curriculum live up to the standards that we are committed to. My goal for our university program in game development is to provide workers that will go out into the industry and make a difference on the basis of what they believe in. I really want to see them think carefully through what it is they believe and how that impacts their application of the technical skills that we help train them in. Now, there's no simple recipe for this. It's not like we would say, a TWU game has to incorporate biblical themes or biblical stories or something like that in an obvious way. Instead, we want our students, whether they come from a Christian background or not, to think carefully about what it is that they believe, what it is that they're committed to, and how they can make that part of their work, part of their creativity, part of their programming, part of the art that they create, and part of the games that they design and create. So that's our goal in all of this, is to take this really important sector of our culture and provide students to go into that world and make a difference. Now, there's a lot more that we could say about video games. There's a lot more we could say about the interaction between games and our culture. Well, there's a lot more that we could say about our game development program. We've really just sort of scratched the surface of a lot of very big topics here. Hopefully we can get to them in our live Q&A. So that's enough for now, and I look forward to talking with you in real time.